What's going on, YouTube? Welcome to Bad Takes in Football. This is your host, Bad Takes. Really excited to hop into today's video, but before I do that, this is a new channel, which means you are new. Please subscribe, like, comment, tell me more about what you're looking for. Really excited to engage with you. I really hope you enjoy today's video. New Orleans Saints, they have a quarterback competition there, and I would say it's not necessarily the quarterback competition that New Orleans would actually be looking for or are excited about. Second year player, Spencer Rattler, who I would say was a highly touted recruit out of high school. I would say didn't necessarily live up to his potential in college. We'll get a little bit more into that. But then also Tyler Shough. Tyler was drafted this year by the Saints. Tyler was drafted in the second round with the 40th pick overall. I would say sort of flew under the radar when it came to the quarterback limelight that generally comes in with the draft and being in the draft. You know, we'll talk more about that side of things with like Cam Ward and others. But Tyler Shough out of Louisville is the other quarterback that is in competition again with Spencer Rattler. So wanted to talk a little bit about this topic and really I think there's some interesting aspects to this. And for you Saints fans, I think this is going to be an obvious discussion and probably not one that you're going to enjoy as much, but I think it's important to still talk about this. So last year, the Saints had drafted Spencer Rattler. They didn't really invest a huge pick with him, right? So we're talking about the fifth rounder. I think it was somewhere around the 150th overall, right? And so not necessarily a position where you are looking at a quarterback or at a player and saying, I expect this player to have an immediate impact on my team. They're not even, not only are they not expecting an immediate impact on their team, generally with the fifth round pick, you're hoping that they just are able to make the roster a year or two down the line, right? They're generally players that you're taking a guess at, right? You're not 100% sure if they're the right person for that position or for the team, but there's some things you like about the player and you kind of want to see how it develops, right? That's generally, I would say, how that works a from like a fifth round perspective, right? And to talk a little bit more about Spencer Rattler, I don't know if you remember, this was before the quarterback, right, of NFL, like the NFL quarterback Netflix series, but they used to have this series called QB1 on Netflix. And Spencer Rattler was on that show along with other quarterbacks like a Justin Fields. And Spencer Rattler was the number one recruit in the nation. He was out of Arizona, was at a highly touted program in Arizona, and he had already staked his claim, and he was going to be the next Lincoln Riley quarterback at Oklahoma. He was going to be that star-studded guy coming out of Oklahoma to follow in the footsteps of those like Baker Mayfield. And really what kind of turned from a amazing, I wouldn't call it a Cinderella story, but like an exciting, hero arc story where Spencer Rattler again goes from number one recruit to, a Heisman quarterback to the number one pick. That wasn't in the cards for Spencer Rattler, right? Spencer Rattler, he ended up losing his job his sophomore year to another quarterback that's now in the NFL and was a first round pick and the first pick overall in Caleb Williams. So Caleb Williams took Spencer Rattler's job in Oklahoma. And I would say that was sort of, I wouldn't even say that was the beginning of the end, because Spencer Rattler also was kicked out of his high school. He was expelled from his high school for an event unknown, not discussed. They're still protecting him from what happened in that situation. But anyway, then he transferred to South Carolina of all places. And, from a South Carolina perspective, what I would say is, I'd say he had a pretty decent career there. I would not say he necessarily like was a star-studded, prove that he should be a first-round pick quarterback. and there's a couple reasons behind that. First things for me would be, he still struggled with things like interceptions. His first year at South Carolina, he had 12 interceptions. His second year, he had 8, which is an improvement, but still not necessarily what you're looking for from like a first round pick. Also only had about 3,100 yards both seasons at South Carolina, which isn't necessarily going to raise any ears or eyes from an NFL scouting perspective, right? You're in the SEC, so yeah, you do play against tough competition, but you are not necessarily proving yourself to be that highly touted recruit that you were out of high school. So that's Spencer Rattler, right? I would say he had an okay college career that turned. I think his name might have carried him more than anything else from that perspective, but he still was performing in a sense. And then, his rookie year, he did play in 7 games. He had more interceptions than touchdowns, right? He had 4 touchdowns. He had 5 interceptions. And he had a little bit over 1,300 yards, right? So, you're talking about a less than desired rookie season. Now, obviously, the New Orleans Saints in general are not necessarily a top team, right? They weren't a Super Bowl contender by any means. They were in the beginning of the season. They actually had a pretty good start, but the wheels fell off pretty quickly for them. Wasn't exactly something he didn't perform to a sense where, as a Saints coach or GM, you're looking at him saying, "I think this guy has a future for us next year," right? So that is important to necessarily talk about. Now, the other aspect of this, and the other player obviously in this entire competition, is Tyler Shough. Now, Tyler is an interesting story, right? There's a couple things about him that I find interesting. So one, he is your prototypical type of quarterback from a size perspective, right? He's 6'5", around 220 pounds. So that is an ideal, I would say, fit or size for a quarterback. But something that's really interesting is he is older, and he is a little bit of a journeyman, similar to, I guess you could say, Spencer Rattler, who transferred in college. Tyler Shough, he actually transferred twice. He started his career at Oregon back in 2019. So that's the other interesting aspect of this. Tyler Shough, even though was drafted a year after Spencer Rattler, he's actually older, right? Tyler Shough is 25 and Spencer Rattler is 24. And they're actually, here's the other weird part, is they have the same birthday. They're both born September 28th, right? One was born in 1999, the other was born in 2000. But they have the same birthday. Tyler just happened to come into the NFL a year after Spencer did. And to go in a little bit more on Tyler, like, for me, I'll be honest, he wasn't necessarily a quarterback that I had on my radar when it came to the draft, right? I think he had a really good Senior Bowl. I think he had some good workouts and some good pro days. And again, when it comes to having that prototypical style and size of a quarterback, it tends to help you out a little bit. Similar to the pedigree, and I would say sort of the storyline about Spencer Rattler being a great quarterback talent, having one of the better arms in college. I think Tyler definitely got a little bit of a nod from the NFL when it came to his quarterback size. Now, again, just to talk a little bit about this, right? He started out at Oregon. He played 2 years at Oregon, and then 3 years, at Texas Tech, and then he finished his career in Louisville. Now, to go into this a little bit more with Louisville and why I think this is an interesting situation is, I talked about Spencer Rattler being a 5th-round pick, right? Tyler Shough, he was a 2nd-round pick. And if you look at his numbers, one, he was in the ACC, but he threw right around 3,200 yards. He had 6 interceptions and 23 touchdowns, right? This is on a 62.7% completion percentage, so decent completion percentage, but not necessarily record numbers by any means. That's not tops in college by any measure. But again, it's pretty lackluster. And so you have the New Orleans Saints, who, in my opinion, I would say are probably a team that is looking for the future. And what I mean by that is they're probably not actually playing for this year. I don't think there is a single player that is on the New Orleans Saints that thinks this is the year that they can make the playoffs. This is the year that they're going to get to the Super Bowl. Sadly, what I think these quarterbacks are competing over is to determine who is going to be the replacement next year. Is it going to be the New Orleans, highly loved, highly touted Archie Manning, who's currently at Texas, right? New Orleans native. The Manning family is royalty in New Orleans, right? Is he going to be the guy? Because really, I think the Saints are going to be a team that's competing for last place. They're looking for that last pick in the draft, or the first pick in the draft, I should say. But they're looking to be in last place because when you're talking about this quarterback competition, again, I compared both of them. They're both very comparable. There is not necessarily someone that sticks out to me one way or the other when it comes to this competition. If anything, I feel like they're both in a bad position because I really do think they are playing for their replacement and who is going to be the actual quarterback for the Saints moving forward. That's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like, comment, tell me your takes. This is Bad Takes from Bad Takes in Football, signing out.